I'm sure we've all seen it already. The Game Awards have announced this year's nominees for all their categories, including, obviously, the big one, the Game of the Year, which I'll be honest, it is a nice list. However, with one entry into this list, there's been a lot of controversy kind of surrounding it. And it didn't really help that they kind of released the rules a few days ago, either on the 14th or the 15th or the 13th. I can't remember what rules there are. Now, one nominee is Elden Ring's Shadow of the Erdtree. It is a DLC, not really a full game per se. And not to say that it's not a bad pick. I'll be honest, Shadows of the Erdtree is a great game. I had a fun time playing it. However, you would assume that for Game of the Year, it had to be a full game, not a DLC/expansion. And with those new rules that they implemented not too long ago, I can definitely see why a lot of people would be mad at this, especially since even though people complained that this has been a slow year for video games, it honestly hasn't. This year has honestly had some major good hits for games this year, and a lot of those games didn't even get nominated for anything this year. I will talk about that later on. So we'll talk about the DLC. As you see in there, it's Shadows of the Erdtree. Now, I would somewhat argue that it is okay to have DLC/expansions in there. However, I feel like it should be up to interpretation. Not really interpretation, but I feel like we'll take, for example, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Torna, the Golden Countries, as an example. Torna is a game that you can actually buy separately from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. You do not need Xenoblade Chronicles 2 to play Torna. You can play it as is like that. I feel like that is technically a DLC, but it's also a standalone where you don't need the base game to play it. However, with Shadows of the Erdtree, not only do you need Elden Ring, but you need to go through a decent length of that game in order to even unlock the DLC. So much so that that people on Steam and other platforms haven't even been able to defeat the one boss that you need to in order to unlock the area to even access it. Now, granted, to be fair, I don't really take much into the whole online thing, because people probably play some of these games offline where they don't have a online thing. So I take those with a grain of salt, but it's still one of those things that's so crazy that more than 50% of the people who own the base game can't even access the DLC because they haven't beaten one of the major bosses that you need to beat in order to access said DLC. If Shadows of the Erdtree could have been a DLC that you could buy separately from Elden Ring, I would be okay with that. However, how this is set up, it feels like it's setting a precedent for what could it be now in the future. Do I honestly think next year they'll also include a DLC? Probably not, because DLCs are situationally weird. We know last year they had Phantom Liberty from Cyberpunk was a major DLC story that released, and it did get nominated for a couple of things, but a lot of people are now like, oh, why didn't Phantom Liberty get nominated? Or Future Redeemed from Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and Blood and Wine from The Witcher, and so on and so forth. Like, there's so many past examples where there was the same situation that Elden Ring Shadows of the Erdtree has now, but now all of a sudden, that since this is a big major expansion DLC of another big former Game of the Year winner, by the way, game, that's like, now they're like, okay, it's fine that we can have it up there. It's crazy that now they're changing the rules. Now it kind of sets up a whole what's going to stop, say, when GTA 6 comes out. Let's say GTA 6 comes out next year. That's obviously going to be nominated for Game of the Year. It's probably going to win it. And then 2 or 3 years from now, they release a big DLC, and now it's like, okay, nominate that for the Game of the Year. I feel like it doesn't really set a good precedent for it. That's like saying we should nominate Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail to be Game of the Year because it's an expansion, it's a DLC, it's definitely the length of its own game, but unfortunately, you can't play it until you've done everything else before it, from ARR, then you have to do Heavensward, Stormblood, Shadowbringers, and Walker, and then you get into Dawntrail. And you have to do a lot of stuff. That's over 300, 400, 500 hours of content just to get to the new stuff if you're starting out right now. So that's another argument. It's like, well, if it's an expansion, it's basically kind of like how Elden Ring is in a way. You get, not only do you get the base game, but then you also get the DLC too. So it's kind of amazing like that. It's like, well, ARR and Final Fantasy 14, you get all this amazing content and subscription based. So I feel like if they included a new category, and this is also going to be another thing, where it's like, well, to be fair, not a lot of DLC gets released within the year, which is fair. But I feel like they could include, it doesn't have to be a category that's included every single year. I feel like that's another thing a lot of people are missing, is just because it's a category this year doesn't mean it'll be a category next year. I feel like it could be a base by base or a year by year basis. They'll be like, okay, we've had good DLC, story expansions, so on and so forth. And that would, I feel like that could also include, you know, whenever Final Fantasy 14 releases a new expansion, that could also fit in there as well. But then you're also feel like, well, then they can't be included in any other kind of categories. I mean, yes, Final Fantasy 14 is always like best ongoing, best community as well. But it could also be like that specific expansion is up for the award right now. Just that specific expansion, even though, you know, majority of the same teams is for everything. But it's one of those things that, again, it's a weird situation for this. And it's like Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is also up for a lot of other awards, which again we've seen DLCs be up for other awards as well. It's like it's best RPG. It's like, well, it's technically is an RPG, but it's also not a standalone DLC on its own. It's not something that you can buy separately from Elden Ring. You need to buy Elden Ring, which again, great game, and then you need to do at least over 100 hours, or maybe a little under 100 hours if you know what you're doing, to get to be able to even access said DLC. And even then, if you try to do the minimal things in Elden Ring just to get to the DLC area is going to kick your ass no matter what, because that place is a lot different than the base game as well, which again is a lot of people's arguments, like, well, it's different than the base game because of so and so and so. So it's just like, again, it's one of those things that it's a case by case basis when it comes to saying have its own category of, you know, DLC of the year or something like that. Like DLC of the year, that could be a good category, even though, like I said, DLC is a rare thing that doesn't really come up every single year. Like, I'm trying to think of what other DLCs came out. It's like, okay, you had Elden Ring. You technically had Persona 3's DLC as well for Reload with the answer. But I'll get into, you know, that in a little bit. If I'm being honest, I definitely have missed a few, but I digress. Another game that is on here that maybe be causing some controversy is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed Rebirth. I loved Rebirth, and I'll be honest, I did enjoy it a little bit more than Remake. But it's in the name. Is a remake and remasters. Should they also be up for Game of the Year? Or, since a lot of remakes and remasters are coming out basically every single year, maybe they can make their own category of best remake / remaster of the year. We've had a lot of those this year. We had Persona 3 Reload. You can definitely include this one. We had Dragon Quest 3 in here as well, and so many others that are just don't even have anything in here. Now, again, it's also one of those things that's another case-by-case thing. This could definitely be another category that doesn't show up every year. Depends on how it is. But there's been a lot of remakes and remasters coming out basically every single year. That's kind of hard to not have its own category, because then you get a game that's missing out. Like Persona 3 Reload has nothing in here, which is a little crazy in my opinion. It has a fantastic soundtrack, but everything else that's also up there is also up for debate. But when it comes to remakes and remasters, that is something that has not been new into the Game Awards Game of the Year situation. Going back to 2019, where the Resident Evil 2 remake was nominated for Game of the Year. And then obviously in 2020, they also had Final Fantasy Remake in there as well. And again in 2023 with Resident Evil 4's remake, even though there's a lot of difference with those games. So it's one of those things, and again, it's a lot of case-by-case basis, but the Game of the Year award is no stranger to remakes or remasters. But again, there's been so many other games that came out this year that I feel like could have been in this slot. I'm not taking away from any of the games that are up here, but if these games had their own category of, say, remake or remaster of the year or DLC or expansion of the year, I feel like it could also, again, open up not only more nominees for Game of the Year, which should include, games that have never been a thing before. Like, it could open up the sequels, new IPs, like we saw with Metaphor in here, and Black Myth Wukong, and Baltoro. Those are some great new IPs from either new companies or existing companies that have already delivered such amazing games before. We could have also had, say, Stellar Blade could have been in here as well. Visions of Mana. That's another game that kind of got snubbed, where there's nothing with Visions of Mana at all in here. There's just been a lot of games this year that I feel like could have been included here. But I'm not going to say anything too bad about the games that we've gotten here. They're all fantastic games. And again, could open up some games that did get nominated in other categories, like a Dragon Infinite Wealth could have been a major release or a major game that came out for Game of the Year. Like Helldivers 2 could have been there as well, even though that's been in other categories as well, which is fantastic. There's been a lot of good games that came out. You have Unicorn Overlord could have also been in there too, because I thought that was a fantastic game. But it might be a whole weird, maybe they don't want too many from the same company, even though Atlas didn't really make it, but they kind of just helped publish the game. Dragon's Dogma 2 could have been in there as well. Like, a lot of games that are like nominated for like either Best RPG or Best Family Game could have also been there too. Rise of the Ronin could have been there too. That's a great game that's a nice game that came out this year. It was a pretty fun game. I enjoy that a lot. Like, I personally probably wouldn't put Rise of the Ronin in there, but I definitely would have put like Stellar Blade in there. Would have put Infinite Wealth in there. There's so many other choices. And again, I'm not downplaying the impact that Elden Ring, Shadows of the Erdtree, and Final Fantasy Rebirth had at all, because they are great games. Don't get me wrong. So I just feel like there should be some kind of way for a compromise to be that. But then you have the people being like, oh, but then won't get into weirds. But I'm just saying this right now. These award shows aren't really much. Yes, it's a nice celebration of the gaming year as a whole. But is anyone actually watching these for the awards? I think majority of the people are watching these for announcements and for new things coming up and coming out, to high anticipated games, either new games that haven't been announced yet, or some updates on games that have been announced but we haven't seen too much of anything yet, maybe release dates of games and such, of all that stuff. But there's so many games that came out this year that I feel like they could have made maybe some exceptions to some of the rules. Again, this would have been a nice year to maybe include hey, here's a remake/remaster category, here's a decent DLC category. There's a lot of stuff. So, but I won't be too mad about what wins this category. Me personally, even though I haven't completely finished it yet, although I'm very close to it, I personally probably would put Metaphor ReFantasio in there as the Game of the Year, just because I feel like it was Atlas's magnum opus. It's a massive love letter to any of the fans of their games that they've had, in terms of either Persona, Shin Megami Tensei, Devil Survivor, all those games, because this game has included a lot of inspiration and a lot of mechanics that have been in all of their games. So again, it's just one of those things that I enjoyed, and at the end of the day, it's kind of my opinion. Be like, oh yeah, I want the Game of the Year to go to Metaphor, because I like it that way. I know I have different criteria when it comes to my top 10 games of the year. I don't include remakes or remasters or DLCs, but again, one person's opinion is different than another person's opinion, and we're all open to the opinions. I feel like there could be some common ground, though, and again, I think it just opened up some more avenues to other games that may not have gotten as big of spotlights or as talked about in these categories type games. And like I said, either way, I'm still curious as to how it's going to go down. I'm still going to watch the Game Awards as I usually do and such. But either way, let me know what you guys feel when it comes to the nominees for Game of the Year and for all the other nominees as well. Which one do you think is going to win Game of the Year? Which one do you want to win? Which one do you think is going to win? Because I actually did that too. I want Metaphor to win, but I honestly think it's either going to go to Rebirth or Shadows of the Air Tree. And either way, I'm not going to be mad either way. I've played every single game that's on this list, save for Baltoro, although I've heard nothing but good things about it, and I might check it out. So there's that. But again, let me know how you guys feel about these games being announced and how you feel about DLC now being part of the Game of the Year category. And do you think it's going to set a precedent for past Game of the Year winners? Like I said, when it comes to GTA 6, if that game comes out next year and then they decide to release a massive DLC somewhat similar to Shadows of the Air Tree in a way. Although with GTA, it's a little weird. Maybe it could be its own standalone thing that you don't need to buy GTA 6 for in order to play, but I highly doubt that'd be the case. But either way, again, like I said, I would be okay with, hey, here's a DLC, like again, similar to Torna with Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Torna is part of the season pass for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but you could also buy it separate from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and you can just play them separately. You don't need to own Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in order to get Torna. If they have a situation like that, then I'm okay with it, because it's a standalone. It's on its own. You don't need to get the game that it's, I don't want to say based on, but it's like you don't need to get the game that's the DLC for, you know? Unlike with Shadows of the Air Tree, you need to buy Elden Ring, which again, great game. I'm not knocking Elden Ring at all, but you need to buy Elden Ring, go through a lot of stuff just to even unlock the DLC. But yeah, let me know how you guys feel about this. Is just my 2 cents. And hey, if you are at all curious with any gaming content, I did live streams of Elden Ring. I did a Let's Play of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Did a Let's Play of Astrobot. I did live streams of Black Myth Wukong. And I'm currently doing a Let's Play of Metaphor ReFantazio. I'm getting close to the end of that game as well. So, and of course, many other games that came out this year as well. Like I mentioned, Visions of Mana, fantastic game. Did a series on that. And so on and so forth. But yeah, guys, let me know what you think about all the categories that were announced for the Game of the Year Awards. And yeah, just let me know. All right, guys. Till then, take care. Have a good rest of your day. I'll see you guys next time.